What is transcending digital? It's the next age of innovation. As we move from the digital age to the imagination age, humanity is moving toward a new era of unrestrained creativity and innovation. We call that the rise of the imagination age. How did we get here? What's our story? Well, we know, as I've discussed many times in the past, that humanity is unique. We have a connection to technology that is special. We use technology to innovate and advance. And if you consider the 4 ages that I'm presenting before you, from the internet age to the imagination age, we've made tremendous progress since the 1990s. You see, the internet age laid down the basics that we needed to be able to communicate on a global basis, to connect with each other, to connect with society, our friends, family members in real time, not on copper lines, but with new technologies in mind. But we were hit by 2 events, Y2K and more recently the pandemic. And these 2 events individually accelerated us to a new level of innovation. As we left Y2K, literally hundreds of thousands of people around the world, engineers, scientists, came together to solve the Y2K bug. They took us to the information age. So much information, so many emails, so much communication via mobile and other technologies. We found it very difficult to keep up, but still connected to our devices in ways that was almost addictive and very different than any other time in history. But what was different about the information age was how focused and ubiquitous the devices have been. The digital age has promised us freedom from those devices because of automation. To be able to analyze all the mounds of data coming to us every day, bombarding us, giving us some time to reflect. Did that happen? The pandemic has been a trigger to drive us to the next stage, the imagination age. You see, if the digital age was defined by technology omnipresence, connecting with the human and converging with the human experience, then the innovation that we create in the imagination age is defined as something different. It's an age where humanity is key. In fact, technology moves completely to the background. And in this new age, we expect that humans will do more communicating than the way we do today. Humans communicating more with machines. Let's go back to the basics of the digital age and digital singularity. There were some critical prerequisites: cloud, IoT, AI, 3D printing, cybersecurity. And as we were able to bring those technologies together, spawned in some ways by the pandemic, taking us to extremely fast speed of transformation, we were able to create a new human experience. It's been truly tremendous to consider that we all got online in the midst of a pandemic and kept businesses going. Could that have happened even 20 years ago without tremendous disruption and upheaval? Our ability to dream and innovate is accelerated with the convergence of technology and human innovation. So as we move from digital singularity to this imagination age, again, the big difference is human intelligence and how it's applying to the data that's in front of it. The ability to use quantum and other information processing technologies at a pace that is unrivaled to today's levels. We are going to enable ourselves to analyze and rationalize data at an infinite speed with the outcome of unrestrained innovation. So let's get grounded. This has been almost a philosophical discussion. How are we going to live and work in this new age? What does it look like? And how is it different than we're living and working today? Well, there are 5 elements that must exist in this new age. The first is multi-site collaboration. We can work anywhere with anyone, and it doesn't matter what country they live in, what geographic boundaries separate us, or time zones. The time that we meet with people will be with people, not with machines. This is important. We will be emailing less. I've been talking about that for some years. We will be using our phones less. We will be looking for richer means of communication that will be multisensory in nature. It will be immersive in nature. We will be connected always and unified across this platform. And with all of it, there will be no visible technology, but the data will be with us. It will move with us. Look at these two in the picture. They're in the middle of a street, and right there, they're able to analyze, without a device, a physical device, where they're going, where they want to be, or whatever problem they're trying to solve. They're just taking a walk. And with multi-site collaboration, as we dig down into the examples, consider how we work today. Well, it's not too different than we worked in the internet age. We had a whiteboard, we got together in a conference room, something that became impossible during the pandemic. $700 billion was saved through remote working. Imagine what we can do in this new age of collaboration. You see in the bottom left corner, people working. This is what we're used to. There's a screen, there's tons of data, we're all in the same room together, we're all talking and collaborating, somebody presenting. We moved quickly to the bottom right corner, which is basically, we all recognize it all too well now, our Zoom calls, or our Teams calls, or our WebEx calls. And with this type of technology, it was better. Why? In some ways, although we weren't meeting physically, and that was a sacrifice, we now could meet with our colleagues over vast distances, which means we could bring people that had never been part of the dialogue and conversation into an equal playing field, a playing field that they had never experienced themselves. Fast forward to the future. What you see here is no devices at all. We're talking. We have a tablet of sorts. It communicates. It provides us with the information that we need. And we use it as a basis for richer communication. What you don't know about that image is everybody's talking from their own house. They have moved into a virtual room, but it feels as though they are together. Time with people, not machines. This is a lovely slide. What you see here is a reflection of an old automobile, actually one of my favorites. And this particular dials and whatnot that we like to see reminds us of that old age where we were in 100% control of the machine. The machine made noise, and it was intentionally disruptive. But if you go to the bottom left corner, you see the introduction of GPS and other technologies. What did that bring us? Well, it gave us some smart innovation. It made sure that our driving experience was better. We weren't looking at physical maps anymore. But as we move to driverless cars, we see today in this digital age, we're able to take our eyes off the road, have a few conversations, or like this woman, have a video call, which I'm not so sure is very safe, at least with today's vehicles. But tomorrow, the imagination age brings us embedded and integrated technology that's all around us. It's embedded in the car or in the office or in the place where we are working or living. And that technology is available in a ubiquitous fashion, which means that we can sit with our colleagues while we're transporting. We can innovate. It is giving us time back, time to innovate. Unified and always connected. Over 100% increase in global wireless connectivity enabled by massive IoT and 5G investment. That's what we're going to see. And if you think about this, look at this slide. We have sort of a PSTN phone, which is an old style phone, and maybe digital, maybe analog. And then we see us moving to mobile devices and email, and then ultimately to our digital age, where we see we're in live video conversations, to this imagination age. Now, built into our homes, we see sensors, holographic synthesizers, allowing us to be able to bring our friend here into our house to have a very real conversation. And you can see the conversation is very engaging and very different than a two-dimensional conversation than we might experience in the digital age. What else is interesting about this imagination age? Well, there's no visible technology. Take a look at this woman. She is connecting people through a standard copper wire system. This is how telephone operators worked in the 1900s. And that was replaced by even more devices in the information age. And today we use virtual reality to try to create that additional relationship and experience with people that we want to have a connection with that is deeper and richer than just voice communications. But in the future, we can see here, again, technology embedded in the world around him. It's invisible. He can call upon it to be able to do a design or to be able to collaborate with colleagues in real time. How much faster and richer does that make the communication and the innovation tomorrow? We went backward in time to look at the last 200 years of modern innovators. And what did they have in common? And what could we do if we could unleash just a little bit more of that? What opportunity would that bring for humanity? Well, the first thing we did is we looked from Albert Einstein to Elon Musk. What were the characteristics that they had? Well, they were all passionately curious. They wanted to create life-changing impact. They weren't just trying to invent for the sake of innovation. They were actually trying to invent because they wanted to change the world. They had a grand scheme in mind. They wanted to create a better world for humanity. They wanted to look beyond the status quo and be relentless about their innovation. And this is one of the factors that is going to be amplified in this new age. Where will the new Imagineers come from in the future? Let's get a little bit focused now on what are the pillars of this age. We've talked a little bit about how's it going to feel like, where is it coming from. We're still trying to get our arms around this new age of human development, what our connection is with technology. Well, first of all, everything that we did in the digital age is not wasted. This digital singularity of converging the human experience with technology is still very much relevant. Innovation prerequisites are something that we will dive into, and that's that second pillar. The third pillar is enabling institutions. And we will need to focus on this one because in this new world, regulators to private industry to even inventors all need to come together. We need to be able to take that vast amount of data and come to some type of grips with it. We want to achieve that infinite imagination. So let's dive into the prerequisites. First, the ubiquity of AI and quantum computing. With the vast amounts of data coming out of this new age, we will need to be able to analyze and rationalize it. We can't keep up anymore. We saw that in the information age. Quality of life falling with emails, with too many phone calls. Not sitting at dinner with your children because they're on the phone, you're on the phone. This age will break us without having that compute power. Universal access to clean technology. Well, if we really want to break open the opportunity for innovation, all human beings need to be part of it. We can't exclude anyone. We have to be in an environment that promotes this type of exchange, where technology is in harmony with the environment. That includes freedom of conflict zones as well. The United Nations has identified over 30 conflict zones. There are many more, where people are not able to get their basic necessities or even education. And without those basic necessities, they're unable to be able to join us in this new economy and in this new world. And the underpinning of all of this is, of course, universal broadband access. And I'm going to talk about each one. Ubiquity of AI powered with quantum computing is going to be critical for us to be able to manage the vast amounts of data. Consider 463 exabytes of data will be created every single day by 2025. And to put into perspective what an exabyte is, how many of you have actually heard of an exabyte? 5 exabytes would encompass the entire human conversation since the beginning of time. Just 5. And with 463 being created a day, imagine how much computing power will be required. And this artificial intelligence powered data analysis will help us create and innovate, having concepts, some of them pre-formulated, available to us at our fingertips. It'll accelerate tasks that previously took much longer. And as we leave the information and digital age, it's not just a prerequisite, it's a requirement. We don't want to live in a world where we are inundated with information that our human brains cannot naturally process at human speed. I had the benefit and opportunity to meet with the Chief Operating Officer at JPL. And it was a wonderful conversation with Larry James. And he's a general, he's a scientist, he's also a philosopher. And I asked him about this question, and he gave me a wonderful example. He said that India and the United States entered into this NISAR mission. The NISAR mission is an Earth science mission launched out of India with a satellite designed to grab tremendous amounts of data on the condition of the planet in a way that we never had before. 85 terabytes of raw data generated daily. And he said to me, he said, this is all great, but we're going to have to learn to analyze this data. And it brought me back to a story which we discussed about Voyager and some of the early Viking missions. You see, at the time that we launched those missions, we didn't have the capability to actually analyze the data that was coming from them. In fact, we're still analyzing it today. We can only guess what this NISAR mission will produce and what it'll tell us about the Earth. But it is also a great example of bilateral communications between countries and partnership. And we will see more of that in the imagination age, because in this new age, the ability to work with scientists and collaborate across boundaries is easy, much easier than it's ever been. If you consider the next prerequisite, which is broadband, and again, you might say, well, we talked about that in the digital age. Broadband would be a requirement. It is, but for a different reason today. If you look at the lesser developed countries, the United Nations reports that 81% of the people in these most least developed countries are without any type of internet access, let alone broadband. Now, if you kick it up to broadband, 40% of humanity's imagination is basically untouched. People around the globe, we don't have access to them. They're cut off from the future. Here comes Spaceport. So some of you may have heard of this story. Spaceport wants to democratize broadband access. SpaceX and Elon Musk has a very ambitious program to launch 12,000 low Earth orbit satellites designed to be able to communicate and create a broadband network for everyone in the world, either extremely cheaply or in some of the lesser developed countries, possibly for free. So why is that important? As the digital divide enhances in the digital age, it will enhance even more in the imagination age. We have to keep people connected to education. We have to keep them connected to each other. Consider, in some of these most underdeveloped countries, people may not have had access to anything or anyone in over a year during the pandemic. There is a challenge, of course. West Papua, which is where we want to build this spaceport, and Indonesia and SpaceX are working in concert to do that because it's an equatorial-based location where launches are more easily had. There are plenty of launch materials for rockets, but there are 100,000 indigenous people, and members of the UN have made a strong case that that's a bad location, that we shouldn't launch, and that SpaceX should not launch, because the indigenous population will be disrupted. These are the kinds of choices we're facing. Do 4 billion citizens of the world remain unconnected if we can't find a better location to protect 100,000 indigenous people? It's an impossible choice in some way, but choices like this will need to be made. We will need to make decisions that are going to drive connectivity in the future. As we move forward, what will our cities look like in the future? And why is it so important that they're clean? Well, first of all, humanity. Consider 7 million deaths annually because of pollution. 1/3 of humanity lacks access to reliable power. How exactly will they be moved into this new imagination age if they don't have power? 9 out of 10 people breathe substandard air with high levels of particulate and pollutants. An interesting case study that I want to share with you is the Saudi Arabia's NEOM project. It's called The Line. It's a city that is built on renewable resources. The city is completely built to be around sustainable development objectives. It's 100% renewable. 90% of the data coming out of this is used for continuous improvement throughout the city. 95% nature preserved, which means we're around nature. There are 0 cars. There are 0 streets. And most importantly, everyone will be 5 minutes away from where they work or where they shop or where they want to meet each other. How are we going to design this sustainable city? Literally, scientists from around the world have come together to build what they call innovative and an invisible infrastructure. The infrastructure exists below the city. Above the city are beautiful vistas and parks and places to eat and communicate and think and dream. And all the technology which exists underneath is under the first layer, which is the service layer, which is power generation, clean power generation, desalinization, all the utilities required to run a sustainable city. And below that is the spine, which is where the transportation layer is. Transportation not only for goods and services, but for people, and at high speed. Imagine being able to go from one side of the city to the other in just minutes. This is a walking city, which means that no cars are required, and people can still meet each other in just minutes. The emphasis here is that the technology infrastructure is so strong that one will not need mobile phones, one will not need devices, that simply through biometrics, the infrastructure around them will be able to connect them to each other. The final point on conflict zones that I want to make is that as we move from these cities of the future, how do we ensure that the final prerequisite is achieved? Well, we have to. The UN and World Bank report $14 trillion of annual cost. $14 trillion of annual cost because of global conflicts. Over 30 conflict zones, 2 billion people live in this kind of environment today, and 1 in 4 children globally. When we consider the weight of those numbers, consider how much worse it is during the pandemic when these same children and those in lesser developed countries were not educated for 1 year. There was no internet, no broadband, or they existed in a place where the conflict prevented them from getting access. The digital divide is widening. The final pillar of the imagination age is enabling institutions and the importance of public-private partnership. And you might find it interesting that I'm using this example of the type of 10x or infinite and exponential innovation that will come. Think about the Manhattan Project. The Manhattan Project, as many of you know, was built specifically for one purpose. The Manhattan Project was built to build an atomic bomb. Operation Warp Speed, which is what we call it today, was originally called Manhattan Project 2. Because the perspective was that we were going to bring people together to be able to create something, a problem to be solved in record time, 50% less time than it might normally take. Again, as we have talked for years, as a 10x, 100x innovation. And with a name inspired by Star Trek, Operation Warp Speed. This operation brought the best of NIH scientists, the best of research in America in the public sector, in the private sector, across NGOs, together to be able to solve the coronavirus problem and to develop a vaccine and treatments for the coronavirus. And they have been, it seems now, successful. Operation Warp Speed. But in this new world, it will be essential that we bring these parties together, because we will need the resources of government to drive that type of innovation, and also in support of the private sector. Consider the SpaceX example with Indonesia. Again, all 3 legs of the pillars. Government support, private industry, coming with the ability to launch satellites, all coming together in a solution designed to solve the grand challenge. And that's no different here with Warp Speed, and that's no different in the line, which is, of course, this new city concept of the future. We bring those pillars together, and that is the story of what is there and yet to come. The imagination age will be a period of sustained human innovation, and I predict it will carry on for generations. We will be never connected with each other in the way that we have been in the past in this new world. We are going to be closer together. And that's important because technology has been a disruptor and interfered with human collaboration. No longer it will return to being an enabler. We will have total freedom to envision new thoughts and dream and create. Thank you so much. and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.